Well, it's pretty clear we can't really ever arrange the church like this in the future because nobody sits here and you're all sitting in the back. So this is great. So I'm just going to talk to you people here today, these empty seats, and how do you begin to express the longing and anticipation that the Jewish people held and expected? The prophet Isaiah is one of the most renowned and holiest of prophets that our Jewish brothers and sisters hold so dear. His words about a birth of a child, and that this child would become a king, and that this child would deliver them, was part of the hope of the entire nation. Even today, in Israel, it's really a theocracy. Their government and their religion are so closely connected. It's part of the very fabric of their culture. And so, even for Mary and Joseph, they live in this time, in this period where this fabric is part of their lives. And so the hope and the promise of a child that would be born, and that this child would be sent by God, from God, for his people to free them, was just something that they anticipated, a constant longing for hundreds and hundreds of years, waiting for God to engage and for God to fulfill his words and his promise through Isaiah. I want to take a look at, there's two very specific appearances of the angels that take place. The one appears to Mary in person while she's awake. And in that encounter, he defines her as favored. He defines her as being selected and chosen, and generally is asking permission for God's will, the prophecy, to be fulfilled inside of her, so that she would bring about the birth of this child. So Mary, we know from the Gospels, Mary instinctively responds. And I'm sure she questions, how does this happen? I do not know man. But in the end, she trusts what she sees. She trusts that there's an angel standing before her, and not just any ordinary angel. It's called the angel of the Lord. The magnitude and of the presence of this angel must have been overwhelming. She believed what she saw, and she trusted, and she said yes. And then the angel left her, and she is now left with just her vision, her experience of the angel. That's all she's left with. So we know in the gospel that Joseph finds out that Mary's pregnant. Remember the cultural context. It doesn't go into detail, but you can imagine the conversations that took place between not just Mary and Joseph, but Mary's family and Joseph's family, because of what has happened. They're already betrothed. They're supposed to be moving in together within, 9 months of the announcement, a year within the announcement. And yet now all of a sudden, Mary is with child. She has to have had to explain everything that she saw, what she experienced. She had to say to them, look, I haven't done anything wrong. This is of God, right? You could imagine her pleading with them to please believe me. And yet all she is left with, which very often is where we're left with, all you're left with is your faith in the midst of everything you encounter. And for her, in the midst of everything she's encountering, and trust me, once the word gets out that Mary is pregnant, she is a girl who has not moved into her husband's house as of yet, and as such, she is liable to being stoned, which is part of the law. People could have easily dragged her outside the town of Nazareth and stoned her to death. She could have been ostracized and tossed out. Please understand all the dynamics and the pressure that is pushing in on this girl, Mary, and her family. Her family, who obviously is worried and terrified for her life. Her family, who doesn't understand what's going on and is trying to give their daughter the best, advice and guidance and trying to get her to tell the truth. And you could almost feel and see Mary pleading over and over again, this has happened. And this conversation takes place with Joseph. As much as she is saying all these things to Joseph, in the daytime, when in the light, in personal one-on-one conversations, despite all of the cultural backgrounds, Joseph cannot bring himself to believe that Mary is the fulfillment of the prophet Isaiah. Remember, this isn't hard. He doesn't have to think hard. This is part of their culture. It's infused in them. He knows this is going to happen. It's been promised that it's going to happen, and it's going to happen by a virgin who will bear a child. And so he knows it's part of their synagogue. It's part of their preaching. It's part of their hope. It's part of their very DNA as a culture. And yet here is Mary saying, this angel came to me, and despite everything that he knows, he cannot bring himself to accept. And so we know, and this is where the Gospels really have always amazed me. The Gospels are a terrible marketing device for Jesus Christ. Because we have in this person of Joseph a guy who's kind of like, okay, look, this sounds really nice. I really feel bad that, you obviously have some mental health issues. I'm going to divorce you quietly, and I'm going to move on. And I don't want any harm to come to you, but I'm not going to stick around for this. Mary's appearance with the angel is in broad daylight during the day. The angel appears physically before her. Joseph's takes place at night. If any of you know anything about Freud, Freud was really big on dream interpretation. Freud really believed that our dreams are an inner part of ourselves that are speaking out. That, not all of them, of course, but some of them could be seen as our subconscious trying to proclaim and project through. It's when Joseph is still and asleep and unable to respond or say anything, which might say something about men versus women. But when Joseph cannot move or do anything is when in his dream the angel comes to him and lays this all out. Don't be afraid to take her. This is fulfilled. This is done. This is by God, through God. And Joseph needs the prodding of the angel to come to believe that what Mary is saying is absolutely true. You can imagine the next morning when he woke up, him going down and seeing Mary and said, I am so sorry. I didn't believe you. I didn't trust you. I didn't believe you. I'm really sorry about that. But there was this angel in my dream. So now you have two people sharing this story about the angel who keeps trying to direct and redirect people to bring about what it is that God is trying to do so desperately. But you could see in Joseph's humanity how it is so difficult to believe something so profound that, yes, the prophets wrote this. Yes, perfect. It's beautiful. We talk about it all the time. Absolutely. But to think that ordinary people could be engaged, positioned by God, engaged by God to bring about God's will, we all sit back and we say, well, not so much. It looks really nice and it sounds really good in the book, but to actually become manifest in everyday life, that's another whole jump. You can't really blame Joseph for where he was in all of that, despite how enculturated he was that this event was meant to and was going to happen. Despite everything, Joseph still doubted, even though just from what he knew from the prophet Isaiah, which we read today, just from what you knew about the prophet Isaiah, all of the check marks were done. All the boxes were checked off. This is definitively how this was going to come about. It was going to be an ordinary virgin, and this virgin was going to bear God's son. And here is Mary saying, look, I've been visited, and yet Joseph has a problem. As Christians, we too have already experienced God's activity on our behalf through the birth of this child and ultimately his death and his resurrection. Jesus' death and resurrection has been complete, has been fulfilled, and what has been promised is already completed by God's own hand. The question is, our own inability to believe is just so human that we should look at that and just accept that as part of our human nature, that this is the way we are. We're going to be questioning. We're going to be doubting. But then ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, do we too really need an angel to show up either physically or in our dreams to convince us? And ultimately, even if they did show up, even if they did make the appearance, wouldn't we question whether what we experienced was actually true or real or not? You could see how humanity, our flawed ability to be so connected to that which is sacred and divine, gets in our own way of fully adhering to and accepting the gifts of grace and mercy and compassion that Jesus has already accomplished. There should be so much more joy in our life because of what God has already done. And yet, like Joseph, we think it's a really nice thing, it's really good, but I'm going to divorce it quietly. Yeah, I might sort of want to believe you, but we're going to sort of keep you at a side. And I think that is our biggest challenge, is getting out of our own way. I think as human beings, we have to get out of our own way and allow God to speak and to work inside our hearts. It could not have been easy for Mary to say yes to the angel because she didn't know what Joseph was going to do. She didn't know what was going to happen next. She didn't know how it was all going to play out. And I assure you, this was not her intention of having her first child in a stable. I cannot imagine, even as a young Jewish girl growing up, that her big desire was that she would give birth to her firstborn inside a stable. And yet, she and Joseph stand against everyone, and they simply hold on to their faith. And this brings me to my last point. It's the reason why we have community. It's the reason why we have a Christian community. It's the reason why we are all disciples and we all come together. Mary by herself was terrified, all by herself, all alone, trying to fight against the torrent of criticism and speculation that was being thrown at her, and yet trying to hold true to who and what she was and what she knew to be true. But there was no one there to support her. And you could imagine just how heartbreaking that really was. I wonder, next to her son dying upon the cross, whether that was one of her most terrifying and horrid moments of an experience as a human being was everyone doubting you because of what has happened. And yet you're trying to tell the truth. But yet God doesn't leave her by herself, because Joseph is inspired by the Spirit, and the angel comes, and now they, the two of them, despite all odds, hang on to each other. One gets weak, I'm sure. The other one holds them up. The other one gets weak, and the other one holds them up. It happens that way. It's meant to happen that way for the Christian community. We're never going to be 100% all the time in our faith. I wish it was true. It's just not my experience. If it's yours, then you are graced, and I am grateful that God has given that to you. But for me, I need experiences like the last couple of nights. I need experiences like that where you can, in those presentations, where you can touch and you can feel God's presence among us. I need those experiences because it reminds me that who and what I am, not as a minister, but as a person who is trying to follow Jesus Christ, that is not in vain. That there are other people who believe what I believe, and that there are other people who will come and stand side by side despite everything that's happening in the world. Us gathered here today and all the people who participate from a distance, we're all this one community holding on to one another, much in the very same way that Mary and Joseph held on to each other all through the birth, all through this experience, their exile into Egypt. Where do you go without a community? Where do you go without people who surround you and care for you and believe what you believe? We draw strength from one another. The last 2 nights, we have all heard this gospel read as part of our narrative for the living nativity. But this morning, we've had a chance to take a look at some of the people who are at play here and to understand how God guides and directs and calls, but never leaves them abandoned and alone and surrounds them with other people to support and care for them. And I think for the Christian community worldwide, we should recognize that we are truly brothers and sisters and that God has given us to one another to strengthen us so that we can really, truly embrace the reality that our God has provided the Christ. Jesus is born. He's already part of our life, and in a couple of days we will celebrate that day. But ultimately it's already done. Can we get out of our own way to make that experience so much more of who we are and what we experience in life? God bless you.